Hey y'all. So I was recently asked on my last video to give kind of some real life examples of ways that I've used kind of the way that I talk about law of attraction or habit changing, law of assumption, anything along those lines. And so I wanted to take this moment to go back and kind of share a little bit of this story and kind of the things that I've had happen. Some feel really kind of, for lack of a better words, crazy, like the way that it all just like unfolded and happened. Some it's still really personal and I am not quite in a position to share yet. I'm just not comfortable, but a lot of it I will. So a few years ago, I would probably say, gosh, probably like 6 years ago at this point, I watched The Secret, which I just remember it so vividly. I remember like the TV, I remember finding it, and it came up, I think, on Netflix, and I was like, huh, what is this? Turned it on, and I swear it's like my life was changed. So when people say that these kind of teachings find you, I really feel like you'll be put on some crazy path to find these kind of teachings when it's time for you. And sometimes you'll find them maybe when you're not quite ready for the understanding. And I believe in my own story has been that I went through a process that helped me have a better understanding and a better way to look at these techniques, a better way to use them. And it took me quite a few years to like figure out how to make it work. And so part of why I want to share this is to let other people know, like, hey, here's a pragmatic way that I figured out how to get this stuff to work for me. And there's things that I'm still uncovering every day and things that I'm learning and that I'm going through. And I recently also, actually, I'll get back to that. Let me go back. So I watched The Secret. And after that, I went straight online and I bought the book. And I was like, this is freaking amazing. It made so much sense to me, the way that you could do this and the way that you could direct the way that you were thinking. But there was some stuff in there that I don't remember all of it, but I remember the one being like, don't use the negative. Like, don't say, I have no bills, because your subconscious doesn't understand that. You have to use this. And I just felt like there were so many like weird rules. And so I started down the cycle of essentially convincing myself that I was doing it wrong. And of course I was doing it wrong because it wasn't really working. It would work and then it wouldn't work and I couldn't understand it. And maybe I was using like the wrong words, or I wasn't doing the vision board correctly, or whatever else it was. So from there I found Abraham Hicks. And I resonated a bit with Abraham Hicks, but not a ton. There was stuff that I got, but I was also like, okay. And what's interesting is that I think I actually understand Abraham Hicks more now than I did then, right? Like, I just don't think I was ready for it, or even beyond being ready for it. I just wasn't able to really comprehend it. It was like, it was smacking me right in the forehead and keep on going. Like, it just was not clicking. And so from there, I ended up having some personal life struggles. And I had gone through tons of books, right? Like, I had read, like Manifesting Made Easy. There's a couple other books that I had read, and I was trying all these things, and I really believed in this stuff. Like, I had stuff that had shown me, like, okay, I really think you can do this. You can direct your thoughts, but I kept still feeling like I wasn't doing it quite right enough. And I fell into a toxic positivity cycle. And then I had some personal hardship in my life for a couple years. And, there's, of course, some unfortunate parts to the personal hardships and just like problems, especially with relationships and love interests that I ran into. And I caught myself up in this like cycle of trying to seek like a specific person. And that led me to Neville Goddard. And from Neville Goddard, I feel like my mind has exploded. So Neville Goddard, I also love Joseph Murphy. I've got a few others that I really enjoy, but Neville is always who I really come back to. And the first time I tried to read his stuff, it was like I was reading in Latin. I had no idea what the heck he was talking about, but for some reason I just kept going back to it. And at that point, it was likely desperation over, a specific person issue, if I'm going to be honest. And my life was just, not going in the direction that I wanted. And then I started to use that, like seeking that, like specific person kind of love in my life. I started using that almost like the ultimate test. If I could get this figured out, then I can prove to myself that this works and that'll build my faith. boy, how naive and ridiculous I was at that time. So, but it really kept me going back to Neville. And what I found is that I put links to his stuff in my content on my podcast here on YouTube all the time because I do find it so beneficial. And what I found was helping me is I found a website. I'll link it below for sure. But I found a website that pretty much what it was doing is it would have the audiobook version and the chapter. And so I would read the chapter, listen to the audiobook, or vice versa. Listen to the audiobook, read the chapter. And doing both of those combined really started to kind of open up stuff for me, and I started to get it a bit more. And then I found myself on the Reddit community. And in Reddit, I made a quote-unquote name for myself by publishing my understanding of Neville Goddard's work. So I've always done like where I would quote whatever I was quoting from the book that I was reading, the chapter that I was on, and then add kind of my bits to it. Here's like what I understand and how this works. And again, I found myself having some remarkable successes, especially in the area of health. I used to have really bad ringing in my ears, and that's essentially gone. I get it every now and then, especially when I'm stressed out, but otherwise it's gone. And I use the Neville Goddard techniques for this, and that was remarkable for me. I've, lost weight using the techniques. I've improved relationships, and with the techniques, but I still found myself, and tons of promotions, raises, getting better bosses. Like I've been able to do that, repairing relationships. That has been phenomenal. And not only for myself, but also for others. I used to have 2 loved ones in my life. They're still in my life, but one of them was really upset with the other. And it was causing like a lot of strife for me, and it really bothered me and stressed me out. And so I used the lullaby technique to repair that relationship. I would go to bed every night. I would bring that person up in my mind, and I would just think of forgiveness, the word and kind of the feeling, but not forced, right? This is what I try to teach in my stuff. It was not forced at all. It was just like thinking of that person and forgiveness. After about a week, they came to me and were like, I am ready to forgive. And I just kind of sat there like, wow, this is so freaking amazing. And this was a couple years ago. And then something happened, and I don't know what triggered it. To be honest, I don't have like this like remarkable story about it unfortunately. I wish I did, but I don't. Where I said, well, the whole point of falling into a new state with Neville Goddard or figuring out a new identity is so that your habits change. If I identify differently, as I did yesterday, the habits that I'll do with those are different. Like I used to really have a sweet tooth. It was borderline awful, like how bad the sweet tooth was. And it would cause me to gain weight, and it caused other problems, and I didn't really like it. And I just was like, but I had always just said, well, I just have a sweet tooth. And so what I did is I said, well, you know what? I don't really want to continue with that path. I want to be like my healthiest self. I'm getting to an age where I want to continue with my mobility. I want to eat well, because when I eat well, I feel better. And I'm just going to kind of start changing my identity and becoming in a state where I am a healthier version of myself. I'm the healthiest version of myself. And along with that, to me, based on my beliefs and what, my core beliefs, that I really don't have a desire to change, because I think that it would take too much work, if I'm going to be honest with you, and too much focus, and I'd rather focus on other things, is that I really should scale back these sweets that I'm eating to be my healthiest self. And if my identity is of my healthiest self, then I would also drop this habit, even subconsciously drop this habit. And so what I found myself doing was saying, well, this can go both ways. I can change my habits to step into a new identity. And as I started to do this with areas of my life, I started seeing more success and more consistent success. So relationships, if I have a relationship that's not going the way that I want, like let's say, a sibling or a loved one or whatever, or somebody at work, coworker, boss, whatever it is, not going the way that I want, then I can say, okay, if this relationship was the utmost best that it could be, what would my daily habits be around this? Like, what would I do? What would that identity look like? And I just started getting really curious, and I struggled. Oh, and I forgot to add that a couple years ago too, I really focused on my emotional intelligence. Like, I'm trying to remember how I found it. It's probably some TikTok, right, that popped up, and I'm like, this seems important. And Neville Goddard teaches you about remaining indifferent, not letting the things that happen to you sway the way that you believe and the way that you're acting and, the faith that you have. And my thought was, well, if I can figure out this emotional intelligence piece of it, I can actually maintain my mood and continue to be focused on what I want to be focused on instead of being swayed all over the place and upset. And not to say I don't still struggle with that, right? Like, I'm still a work in progress. Even Neville Goddard had said in a lecture that he did, that he's like, I've been teaching this for 30 years. I still have to focus on my mood. I still have to remind myself. So we're human. That's why, like, the more that I think about that, the more forgiveness of self is such a key point. And so what I did is I started really turning the focus on myself. And like I've said, I've talked in other content about being selfish and self-prioritizing. And for me, my family is my everything. My kids are the most important things in the world to me. My family, extended family, my, core family structure, all of them, my nieces, nephews, absolutely mean the world to me. But I give the best to them when I'm the best version of myself. And so I started, really finding a way to say, okay, how can I be the best version of myself? Well, I want joy in my day. So I'm going to start adding joys to my day. I'm going to be mindful about those joys. I'm going to really focus on my emotional intelligence, which means being really curious about my reactions and why something is bothering me and why it's not bothering me. And whether that means that I have to address head on an issue that happened last week, or I have to address head on an issue that happened in my childhood. I had some very traumatic events happen to me in my childhood, and I really needed to make sure that I process those. And as much as I believe that consciousness creates reality, no doubt, I also don't believe that I caused that crap to little me. Little me didn't deserve that, and I don't know why that happened to little me, and I don't know what could be done differently to little me. But I also recognize and appreciate what I learned from those experiences, that the ability to work through my trauma as an adult from my childhood opened up a whole new world for me as far as emotional intelligence and getting in touch with myself and being able to speak to others, about hey, you can forgive. And you can forgive and stay away from somebody. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But you can forgive and be like, I forgive you, and I'm going to do that for my peace and also for your peace, but I need you to be away from me. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. So it's not that I wish you bad. I definitely wish you the best, but I wish you goodbye. So there's nothing wrong with that. And we'll get into that in more videos. I feel like I'm talking a million miles a minute. I did have a big coffee this morning. But I really wanted to share some of this, right? And how I ended up where I am. And so, I started mapping out, who do I want to be? How do I want to present myself to the world? How do I want the world to treat me? How do I want to be perceived and to be treated? And what kind of life do I want? And then I said, well, if I was that person, how would I be behaving? And then I started asking myself throughout the day, is this aligned to that person? No. Okay, then why are you doing it? And I talk to myself like that a lot, in full transparency as well. But so that's where I'm coming from. I hope that helps kind of open up what the channel is about, what my content is about, where I'm going with this. And then, I think it's great, and I really look forward to sharing more.